In this video, we're going to be talking about the Sony ZV-E10. Over the last week, I have been shooting photography and video content with it down in London and up here in the north. I think this camera is quite interesting. It's similar yet different to the Sony a6400, whilst remaining quite a bit cheaper. But should you buy it, and is it worth it in 2023? I will note that this isn't going to be a direct comparison between the Sony a6400 and the ZV-E10, but it's more going to be a reference point, because I think it's quite difficult to talk about the ZV-E10 without bringing in to equation the Sony a6400. Let's kick things off by having a look at the form factor. This being a Sony APS-C camera, it's lightweight, it's small, it's a really easy everyday carry. It's somehow slightly smaller than the a6400, which is mighty impressive, and I've been using it a lot with the Sigma 18-50. When you have a lens and camera combo of this size, it really allows you to remain incognito. When I was doing street photography, I was able to get so close to subjects and get some absolutely fantastic results. The same goes for video as well, and even though this camera doesn't scream professional, you will get professional kind of results out of it. When you compare this setup to a full frame equivalent, you can really see the size difference, and I tell you can also feel it as well. Now, when you do compare this camera to something like the Sony a6400, you are going to notice some big differences with features and buttons. The first one is you don't get a dial to change modes, instead you get this button. Now, I have hit this button accidentally on a couple of occasions, so when I've gone to take a photograph, I've accidentally ended up in video mode and missed a shot, but that might be more of a me problem not being used to the camera rather than a problem with the camera itself. This also means that you have to change your shooting mode through the menus of the camera. I thought this was actually going to be quite annoying, but usually because I shoot in manual for both photography and video, once I had manual set up, I never found myself needing to switch. If you are someone though who regularly switch shooting modes, I have got a little tip for you. What you do is you custom your function menu and you make sure that one of them is your shooting mode, so you can quickly change what mode you need to be in, and I found that's been a really quick and really easy workaround for not having a mode dial. You do get one custom button with this camera, and it's set to like a defocus mode, which I've played around with a bit, and you know what, you can get some really cool results with it just with a click of a button. Really ideal if you just want to get like a shallow depth of field look to your video, but I ended up switching it because I didn't find myself using it that often at all, so I actually changed it to my focus area, because I regularly change my focus area for both photo and video. On the shutter button of this camera, you also have a zoom rocker, so if you have one of Sony's power zoom lenses, you can use this to have nice smooth zoom ins or zoom outs to your footage. Now, you can also use it without having one of those lenses, but instead it will just digitally zoom in to your video. And a couple occasions I have accidentally knocked this and I've been a little bit zoomed into my video without actually realizing, so there is just something to be a bit mindful of there. If you don't have those power zoom lenses, I personally would just recommend turning it off so you don't accidentally knock it. We also have a different kind of internal microphone on the ZV-E10 compared to something like one of the a6000 series of cameras. You get this like dead cat right here, and then the microphone just is here. We're going to be doing some vlog tests for this later on to see how it performs. I can't get this back on now. The final noticeable change between the ZV-E10 and something like the a6400 is the monitors. The first one is the viewfinder. There is no viewfinder on the ZV-E10, which I think is definitely going to be one of the key attributes to push people away from this camera and towards something like the a6400. Now, for me personally, it doesn't bother me that this camera doesn't have a viewfinder, because when I'm shooting with even something like the Sony a6400 that does, I'm usually shooting a POV. So I have the camera out here, I'm using this monitor so you guys can see what I'm seeing, and I rarely use the viewfinder anyway. I do much prefer the flippy rotatable screen on the ZV-E10 compared to the design on the a6400, but one thing I honestly hate about this camera is the screen quality. It is straight out the bargain bin. It's horrific. It's not sharp, it's not color accurate, and it definitely ain't user friendly. There was a couple of times when I was shooting my POVs with it that I commented on how the photo looked overexposed. It wasn't until I got back to post that I realised that my exposure was actually spot on. It was just a display saying it was overexposed when it wasn't. The low quality display was amplified when I was trying to shoot S-Log2. I was using the gamma assist display, which does help with exposure and seeing how my final image would look, but even then, it looked wrong. It didn't look right. The colours looked off. The blues had a massive magenta shift to them, and it never gave me the confidence when trying to expose for photos or videos. I wish that Sony, and I think a lot of people agree with me what I'm about to say here, I wish that they would stop releasing cameras with horrific LCD displays. They put all these fantastic photo and video specs into these cameras, right? And then pair it with the worst kind of LCD screen imaginable. Like, imagine if Sony ever released a monitor for desktops and laptops, and it was a budget one. No one would buy it because we all know how atrocious and how garbage these kind of cheap monitors are from Sony. It is honestly my biggest disappointment with this camera, and it is a shame because it's the only monitor you get with the camera. When it comes to photography, the Sony ZV-E10 delivers, but we shouldn't all be really that surprised because the sensor that you find in the ZV-E10 is the same sensor as you'll find in a lot of the A6000 series of cameras, including the A6400. This means that you'll get a camera with a 24 megapixel sensor that will rapid fire up to 11 FPS burst shooting and also facilitate lightning fast and reliable autofocus. When I was shooting with this camera down in London, it gave me the tools I needed to create some stunning photos. And going back to the form factor, I think having a smaller kind of setup definitely allowed me to get closer to people without it being too noticeable. The photo examples you are seeing were taken with either one of two lenses, the Sigma 18-50 or the full frame Sigma 85. With the ZV-E10, you are of course missing that viewfinder. You don't actually have a pop-up flash, but to be fair, as I said, I don't hardly use the viewfinder, and I've never used a pop-up flash on the A6400, so I'm not really missing those features personally, but of course your mileage might vary. You are missing a couple of function buttons, which would have been nice to have, but it's just one of those things. But weirdly, you do get one advantage with the ZV-E10 over the A6400. The minimum ISO on the A6400 is 100. With the ZV-E10, it's 50. So they've obviously done some tweaks to this sensor, so you do get 50 less ISO if you want it. Don't know if you ever need it, but it's the only thing I've noticed. The Sony ZV-E10 is definitely a video-focused camera, and it's ideal for new videographers who are looking at taking their content to that next level. With this image, you can shoot 4K up to 30 FPS, that is downsampled from 6K, 1080 up to 120 FPS for some buttery smooth slow-mo, lightning fast video autofocus with eye tracking, an absent feature in the A6400. In addition, you also can adjust the AF transition speed and AF subject sensitivity, which means you can really fine-tune focus parameters. Additionally, you get all the picture profiles with this camera, which allows for flexibility if you want to start color grading now or in the future. I've mainly been shooting with S-Log 2, and interestingly, it feels like the S-Log on this camera is easier to color grade than the A6400, which is strange because they share identical sensors. Maybe Sony have been doing some tweaks to it. This camera also has some really useful usability features, such as a tally light and a red border on screen, so you always know when the camera is rolling. There are also some really great content creator focused features such as product showcase, which allows the camera to prioritize focus on products you bring in front of the camera before focusing back on your face when you take the object away. I think that's a really cool feature. With these features, we can definitely see that Sony is targeting content creators and vloggers with it, so I guess I should put it to the test and do some vlogging with it. So this is a little vlog test with the Sony ZV-E10, and immediately one thing I'll say is this is a really nice lightweight setup compared to my normal go-to vlogging camera being the A7S III. Oh, this is just so much easier to carry about with you, and you don't feel it on your arm at all. Now I am also vlogging with the 16-50 standard kit lens because this has optical steady shot. I've been testing out the 18-50, and that is the only downside with that lens, is it doesn't have optical steady shot, so it's not really ideal for vlogging. And if you are going to be doing this, you want OSS on your lens to help reduce some of the jitters and everything and just make your shots a little bit more stable. Now there is a couple of lenses I can recommend if you are going to be doing some vlogging with this camera. The first one is the Sony 10-18 f4. That lens is one of the best lenses for vlogging. Now it does cost just as much as the camera, but if you want like the top tier, like the top dog for vlogging, you want that lens. The other one I can recommend, which is a lot more budget friendly, is the Sigma f1.4, the 16mm. So I'm currently shooting this at 16mm with the standard kit lens. So this is the kind of look you can expect from that focal length. But if you get a variable ND filter, you can get that f1.4 aperture and get some stunning depth of field to your shots. Now, it is also worth mentioning, I'm not using a variable ND filter. Everything is in standard picture profiles, everything is standard, it's on the intelligent mode, and also the audio is internal, and I've got the dead cat on top. So hopefully everything looks good and sounds good. Now, there are a couple of downsides with the Sony ZV-E10. The first one is the active steady shot. You're not going to be using this realistically when you're vlogging. The only way I can see this being usable is if you're going to be vlogging with something like the 10 to 18 to compensate for that heavy crop. The active steady shot is okay for some handheld stuff, but unless you're being really stable with it, you might notice some micro jitters with it. I don't think it's the most refined thing in the world. Honestly, I personally wouldn't ever use it. I'd rather just use the optical steady shot on the lens if I had it available to myself. Either that or I'd use a gimbal, because the brilliant thing with a camera like this is you don't need a super expensive or heavy gimbal to get some really good footage of it. You could buy something that is really budget friendly, stick it on it, and you'll get a lot better footage with a gimbal than you ever will with any of the stabilization options internally on these cameras. I guess when it comes to filming, the only big downside I've seen is with the rolling shutter. So basically this occurs when you move your camera from side to side really fast, or you have a fast moving object moving through your frame. You'll get this kind of weird warping kind of effect to your visuals, and unfortunately there is no workaround for it. It's just something you're going to have to bear in mind. Apart from that, I am really impressed with the video capabilities of this camera, and I really like the features that have been added to help out content creators. I guess the ultimate question is then, which one do you choose? The Sony a6400 or the Sony ZV-E10? This is an easy and tough question at the same time. If your prime focus is going to be photography, you want to go with the a6400. It's got the mode dial, it's got the pop-up flash, it's got a couple of extra buttons, and it has the viewfinder. It's focused and geared towards photographers first. If you're going to be doing video shooting, you're a content creator or you're a vlogger, you want the Sony ZV-E10 as it's set up and geared towards video shooters first. However, the tougher question is, what happens if I do both? And this is where I'm rendered a little bit useless, because I can't really give you a straight answer, because it really just depends on your use case. So this is how I look at it. If you're going to be doing a lot of photography and a little bit of video, a6400. If you're going to be doing a lot of video and a little bit of photography, the ZV-E10. But if you do an even 50-50 split, that's where it gets really tricky, because both of these cameras make a really good case for themselves, and I don't know. Honestly, I have no idea. It's too tough to call. I want to open up the floor to you guys. Which one would you choose? The Sony a6400, that's the ZV-E10, you idiot. The Sony a6400 or the Sony ZV-E10? Let me know in the comment section below. Alright, so that is where I am going to be leaving today's video. Hopefully I covered everything that needed to be covered with the Sony ZV-E10, but if you have got any further questions or anything, let me know in the comment section below. And if you did like today's video, make sure you hit the like button, you whack it, you smack it, you do whatever you like to it. And also hit the subscribe button, turn on the bell icon to be notified whenever I release a new video. But until next time, create, explore, and inspire. And I'll see you in the next one. Laters!